The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to the Arise to Success show. In this show, we aim to highlight inspiring individuals and their journeys to success. My name is Gehad, I'm your host in this show. Today's show is pre-recorded, so we won't be able to take any calls today, but please feel free to text WhatsApp if you have any thoughts about the show on 0779 481822, or you can also comment on Facebook. Our guest today is Mahdiyya Dharas, who's an audiologist, lecturer, and runs her own business as well. Besides talking about her expertise today, inshallah, Mahdiyya will also be sharing with us her story about the difficulties she had in achieving her goals and how she managed to overcome them. Mahdiyya, welcome to the Arise to Success show. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. So Mahdiyya, maybe if we can start with if you can tell us more about, what you do, a bit more details on that, and what is an audiologist?
Yeah, sure. So an audiologist is someone who does everything to do with ears, whether it be hearing loss, earwax removal. We deal with tinnitus, so people who have suffer with noises in their ears, and in my case, dizziness as well. So in our ears, we've got the hearing organ, and then we've got the balance organ in our ears as well. So I specialize in diagnostics and treatment of vestibular dizziness that comes from the inner ears.
Okay, quite interesting, mashallah. And how long have you been doing that?
So I've been doing it for about, gosh, I'm old, for about more than 15 years. So
Mashallah, so
yeah,
very
yeah.
well experienced, mashallah.
Thank you. Yes.
So with your business, because you manage your own business as well, is that as an audiologist as well, or what do you do for your business?
Yeah, so I worked for about 12, 13 years in the NHS. And then about 5 years ago, I started my own clinic. So initially, I started just with focusing on vestibular treatment. So my business was treating people with dizziness and vertigo using physical therapy and exercises. And then it expanded a little bit, alhamdulillah. So I went on to do things like earwax removal. I do lip reading classes. I do Tai Chi classes to help people with dizziness using Tai Chi. And inshallah, I'm looking to now prescribe hearing aids as well privately in my clinic.
Mashallah, I didn't realize that Tai Chi helps with vertigo and dizziness, subhanAllah.
Yeah, Tai Chi is amazing. So it's like a form of martial art,
Yes.
but it's a very holistic way of treating your body and sort of exercising your body. So it's similar to, you know how they say yoga is very good for not just the body, but for the mind and your spirituality as well. It's the same with Tai Chi. So people in the Far East use it as a way of life. It's almost like, well, not quite a religion for them, but it's like a way of life. They use it to treat lots of different problems and disorders, and dizziness and balance is one of them.
Interesting. So I'm just wondering here, those who do Tai Chi, is it a way to prevent them from having these problems as well, or does it only help if you have the problem?
No, it doesn't. It's not just a way to prevent. It's you can use it to prevent problems. So you can use it to make your balance a lot better, but it doesn't mean to say you have to wait for a problem before
Yeah,
you prevent it. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
for those of them that do yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi on a regular basis, you're more likely to be healthier for a long period of time.
That's quite interesting because when you mentioned that some countries they practice it a bit more than others, I was thinking, those countries maybe they are healthy in the sense that they don't develop these issues in terms of the dizziness and so on because they're already doing it. So that's quite interesting. I never knew this because I can't remember if actually, no, I don't think I've taken parts in the classes, but I have seen my martial arts instructor doing Tai Chi. So that's really interesting.
Mm.
So, sorry, go ahead. You want to say something?
I was just going to say that the NHS has done research on this, and there's been a high correlation of older people who suffer with falls and dizziness, when they do Tai Chi as a rehab treatment, yeah, their symptoms go and they feel a lot better in themselves.
Wow, subhanAllah, that's amazing. And it's something that is quite enjoyable actually, because when I saw it,
Yeah.
it's like a bit of martial arts with a bit of dancing. So
It's a really fun way of treating dizziness, definitely.
it is definitely, yes, mashallah. Maybe we can ask you to do a bit of Tai Chi, but oh
Oh
no,
God.
because this is the radio, so
Another episode.
we won't ask you to do that
Yeah.
today. Okay, so for you, how do you, mashallah, juggle between all the different multiple things that you do? Because you're a lecturer as well, and you do your own business. And as you said, you started 5 years ago, and mashallah, you were expanding. So I'm just wondering, how do you juggle between all of that?
It's a really good question, and I'm going to take this moment to put a disclaimer out there because this has been a journey for me. I'm also a mum of two twin boys, and for me, it's not just juggling the different aspects of my work life, being a lecturer and running my own business and all that stuff. The biggest thing for me has been juggling the work life balance, like
Mm,
work with personal life.
mm,
It's a journey I'm still going through, and I can't say I've cracked the code yet, so I don't know the answers yet. But
yeah.
I just wanted to join the conversation because I feel like, uh, which we'll talk about in a minute, like that I have had quite a few barriers and challenges come up, which
Mm,
has really made me question whether my career is something that I should push forward with and whether I should be focusing on my personal life more. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share some tips and advice of things that have helped me and my family life,
mm,
and my work life as well, to reach the successes that I have
mm.
within
Eh,
it.
yeah, go ahead.
So you asked, how do I juggle it? So the first thing I would say is time management. Like, that's so
Mm,
important.
mm.
Um, yeah, and it's are you what's your next question? Let me see if I can answer that one
No,
first
no,
before I
please
come
go
back
ahead.
to
Go
this
ahead.
one.
No, take your time.
Yeah. So I was going to say, just to kind of put things into perspective, like some of the things that I had challenges with was in the so especially the year 2021, which is when I made that decision
Mm,
to push forward my business and to really focus on it. Obviously I had my twin boys that year, so six
mashallah.
months before. So I had newborn babies in the house, and
Mm,
at the same time, unfortunately, my mother-in-law, who was living with us, became unwell,
mm,
and in the end, she passed away. But yeah, so that was going on at that time. So I was
mm,
caring for my mother-in-law. My husband and I, we were both caring for her full time at that
mm,
point. And I was also doing a master's. So I was also
mm,
a student, and I was doing my
mm.
master's. I was working in the NHS, and I was running my own business. So there
Wow.
was a lot going on.
Mm,
And yeah, it was really difficult. And my mental health at that point was at its lowest. So it really sort of
mm,
went down. And it was trying to deal with the mental health side of things, and trying to deal with and how to sort of make myself a stronger person to kind of achieve the goals that I wanted to achieve in my work life.
mm.
Yeah, so that was a lot going on.
Wow, subhanallah. So perhaps that now that you've started talking about this, maybe we can actually talk a little bit more about those struggles. But just to remind the listeners, first of all, as well, that we have Mahdiyya Dharas on the show today, who is an audiologist, lecturer, and runs her own business. And inshallah, she'll also be, besides talking about her expertise and the areas that she specializes in, she'll also be sharing her story about the difficulties that she had in achieving her goals. And you just touched upon that, Mahdiya. So, being a new mom of twins, a carer for your mother in law, a student, and working as well, and having to, as a carer as well, worrying about, your mother-in-law and what she was going through. So I'm just imagining all of that going on, and of course, as you said, having an impact on your mental health. How was it like, and how did you, manage to overcome all this?
Yeah, it was really tough. And at this time, the pandemic was going on. So,
Mm,
yeah, so we were pretty much in lockdown. I think it was lockdown 2 or 3.
mm,
Um, so I guess the first thing that I did to try and overcome it was, and I know, Jihad, that you're a big advocate of this, is to
mm.
understand your own personality.
Yes.
So I did a lot of that. I
Mm,
started therapy, which was
mm,
really, really helpful. And what we did was we sat down, and I realized that I did an MBTI personality test, and I am an ISFJ. So
oh,
yeah,
interesting. Yes.
so I
Very
take
nice.
Yeah, which makes me the perfect healthcare professional because
Yes.
it ticks all the boxes of empathy, working
Yeah.
on my own initiative, taking
Yeah.
on responsibility. But it didn't
Mm.
help in my personal life because I didn't delegate. I took everything for myself. Like everything was my responsibility.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my husband unfortunately became redundant, so he lost
I'm
his
sorry.
job. So I took on the. So in my, no one told me this. I was just doing
Mm.
it to myself. I was putting on
Mm.
that pressure on myself, and I
Mm.
decided that I needed to help financially. I needed to care. I needed to parent. I needed to run my
Yeah.
own business. Blah blah blah. So learning about my own personality really helped
Yeah.
because to know what my strengths and weaknesses are and to make sure that with my strengths that I was using that to help
Mm.
myself become better, and in terms of my weaknesses to work on that.
Mm.
So the first thing that I did was I decided to delegate,
Yeah.
which
Good.
sounds really simple. It sounds really like common sense, but for me, it was like a difficult thing to do.
Yes.
To say to myself, this is too much, and
Yeah.
I need to. Something's got to give,
Yeah.
and to make big decisions like, as women, we put on a lot of. We're given a lot of pressure in that we're told that we have to be perfect mothers and wives and daughters, and then
Mm.
also at the same time in this day and age we have to work at the same level as our our as our spouses, and
Mm.
to bring in that we have everything has to be 50-50 now. You have to bring in financially 50%, but also at the same time you have to be a full-time parent and do all of this at
Mm.
home. So I had to really sit down with myself and I had to say to myself, do you know what? What is it that I can delegate and
Mm.
give away? And what do I need to carry on doing myself? So I decided that financially, I couldn't delegate that to my husband solely. We were in a position where I really needed help. So I said to myself, okay, I decided to put the kids into nursery.
Mm.
And that was a big thing for me because that's not something I wanted to do. And that mum guilt was really difficult. But I said to myself,
Mm.
do you know what? It's a good nursery. I'm happy to put them there because what that does, it gives me time to care
Mm.
for my mother-in-law who was nearing end of life, and to really focus on her because I wasn't going to get that time back and she really
Mm.
needed it. And also to help my husband financially. So this is where it gave me time to work on my business. And
Mm.
it was a lot of money putting twins in nursery. And it didn't
Mm.
make sense at the time because all the money I was earning was just going into nursery. But
Mm.
actually, in the long term, it really helped financially in terms of my career development and achieving my goals.
Yeah.
And it was worth the risk that I took because,
Mm.
Alhamdulillah, now I can say that actually I'm in a good place in terms of my career, but also I'm in a place where I can actually take my kids out of nursery and have more time at home with them because I'm financially stable enough to do that. So it
Mm.
was a big risk at the time. The other little delegate thing that I did was that was really big for me. It sounds really little, but actually for me it was a big thing was
Mm.
saying to my husband, I need your support. And for him to actually say, do you know what? On a Saturday, I'll look after the kids on my own
Yeah.
and you go out and you work. And
Mm.
I'm so grateful for him for doing that because that really gave me that time to work on my business. Because during the week, I was working in the hospital. And then
Mm.
with my business, I was doing that in my own time.
Mm.
And so that really, really helped that he was there and my family support was there to sort of do that for me. So I could then
Mm.
focus on my career. And the other thing I dealt with was the shame of having to make that decision to say to myself,
Mm.
actually, do you know what? For me and my family, that's the right decision to make, to
Yeah.
not have to not, because with kids you are looking after them 24/7. It's not just through the day, it's through the night as well. But to
Yeah.
allow myself a few hours in the day
Mm.
to work on my career is okay to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was the
Wow.
first thing. Yeah.
Go on.
um
Go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah. If you would like to say more, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so the second thing I did was to go out and look for support.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I did was look for business support. So there's
Mm.
so many organizations and charities out there that will help you develop your business.
Mm.
So uh, in the sort of Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire area, you can access Wenta. So Wenta is a
Mm-hmm.
really good forum. They give you free business coaching. They give you free classes on different aspects of your business, so marketing and all of that that stuff as well, accountancy and how to do all, because when you're running a business, you're wearing all these different hats,
Yes.
and you have to be the accountant and you have to be the marketing person. So that's a lot to take on. So they really, really helped me with that. Highly recommend them.
Mm.
Um, Networking groups.
Mm.
So that really helped me talking to other people who are in the same position as me, new startups, new entrepreneurs. That really helped. So that's the second thing I did, was to go out and look for business support.
Mhm.
And the third thing I did was to ask for financial help. So again, there was a big element of shame and guilt that came with that, where I thought to myself, because I'd never been in a position where I'd had to, apply for benefits or anything like that. And I had to really sit down with my husband and we had a chat and we were like, do you know what? We're at a point in our lives where we do need some sort of support financially.
Mm.
And so we applied, and I was on maternity leave at that point. There wasn't any income coming in. He was redundant, and so at that point in our lives, it was okay for us to ask for support financially. And I accept now, on hindsight, that although I had a lot of shame associated with it, I feel like now that I'm running my own business and paying tax, I feel like I'm giving back to the community.
Mm.
I do a lot of charity work on the side as well, so I feel like that kind of balanced that out. So it's okay at that moment in that time to say to yourself, do you know what? I need help, and to
Mm.
ask for it. So that was another thing that I did. Yeah.
That's great. And sorry, did you have any more to add there?
I have loads, but I'm going to stop there.
That's
I,
amazing. I'm sure that our dear listeners would love to hear more as well. But I just wanted to also comment in a few things. And I'm so glad you mentioned about the personality, because that's the first thing. Knowing your own personality is very important, as you've mentioned, because then you know how you deal with things and how you can start supporting yourself as well. Because when you mentioned ISFJ, that's the personality that takes on a lot of responsibility. They feel highly responsible for everybody around them.
mm,
And for your information as well, Sahabas like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu has this personality, as well as from the females, Hafsa radiallahu anha, who is the Prophet's wife. So, I always like to give examples of our, Sahabas as our role models. So the more we learn about them, we can become like them as well. So they feel
absolutely.
highly responsible that they need to take care of everybody. And now, when you knew your personality, you knew how to accommodate and how to help yourself, right? And for you to start delegating and give, tasks to others, that's very difficult for your personality.
It was so hard. I had to really sit down with my therapist and my family, and I had to be like, I can't do this. And they were like,
Yeah.
yes, you can, just give something away. So, yeah.
Now, very difficult to do, but when you've done it, how did it feel?
It felt amazing. At the time, it didn't, because, as I say, there was a lot
Yes.
of shame involved
Yes.
with it. Like the feeling of shame was like quite big for me. But now, on hindsight, it did help my mental health quite a lot, to take away that mental load, because I didn't realize how much I was literally carrying on my shoulders, and to
Mm.
just give that off a little bit, it was great. It was, yeah, yeah, it felt amazing.
Yeah, yeah, oh, absolutely. And that's what I wanted to make sure that I highlight as well to our dear listeners, because sometimes it's very difficult to go against our nature, right? Because for you, it's all about, you know what, I need to be the one taking responsibility of everybody, because that's natural for you. That's how you're responsible. That's what your personality is like. So having to start to delegate and give tasks to others, that would feel very difficult because it's not natural. But then once you've done it, because you were in a situation where you needed to do this, otherwise it was affecting your mental health,
Yeah.
and it would start to have implications in your life overall as well. So sometimes, although there are certain ways of, or there are certain things that we do that are very comfortable for us, it's okay to do them if they suit you. But then once they start to create difficulties for you, like you when you're in a situation where you had so much going on and you had to be juggling between so much and it start affecting mental health, this is when you realize, actually, you know what, I need to to put a stop here and need to make some changes. So it was a difficult decision, but alhamdulillah, as you can see, it has made a lot of difference for you, and it has made life easier for you. And then on return, it starts to impact your mental health positively.
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned delegating, you mentioned getting the support, and as you said, financial support was very difficult for you, and you felt the shame and all of that because it's not something that you're used to. And again, coming to your personality, Your personality is a kind of, personality that I need to be providing that I need to be taking care of everybody. So all of a sudden to be cared for, and even though it's just something small as financial, it was difficult to do that. But then, alhamdulillah, when you've done it, it has helped at the time, and as you said, now you can give back to the community. So overall, I just want to conclude here that the sometimes when we are in a situation where we can't handle it on our own, it's okay to ask for support. You mentioned the support in various forms, as in financial, and also for your business networking as well. And you've mentioned one to, if anybody here is listening to us who is in support of or in need of business support, I have, attended their webinars, and they have been very helpful as well.
Very good. Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So, mashallah, these are great things that you've addressed here. And I just love the fact that you mentioned about your personalities, because that's a piece of work that I am so passionate about. So, we can relate it here quite a lot, alhamdulillah. And we can highlight as well how important it is for us to understand our personality. Because if we don't understand our personality, we won't be able to know what methods to use and what's best to accommodate for our needs. Go ahead, Mahdiyya. I think there was more tips that you wanted to provide. But actually, before we do so, I'm just going to quickly remind the listeners, just in case anybody joined us a bit later. So we have Mahdiyya Dharas with us on the show today, who's an audiologist, lecturer, and runs her own business. And besides talking about her expertise, inshallah, which we'll talk a little bit more about after the break. But for the meantime, Mahdiyya is sharing her story about the difficulties she has experienced in achieving her goals. And I just wrapped up some of them just now, and I believe that you've got some more tips to share in a few minutes before we have the break.
Okay, sure. Yeah, and I guess what else did I ask for? So we asked for parenting support. So with twins, like not when they were newborn, but now we're experiencing a little bit of challenging behaviors and things like that. So the other thing I asked for was what I did was I went out and I got myself a parenting coach. And especially if you can get yourself a parenting coach who is faith-based, because it's important for us to kind of keep to our hadith, and it's nice to be able to link, because a big thing about parenting is being in terms of it's you have to work on your spirituality quite a lot, because there's a lot of generational cultures and traumas that you have to kind of deal with in order to present a better parenting role model. So yeah, if you can find a faith-based one, that's a really good idea. So that another thing that really helped us. And again, there's so much free support out there, and it's the little things you don't realize, because when you're going through stuff, it's very difficult to sit down and think outside the box. And sometimes you just need like an external person who's not a family member or a friend or a work colleague, someone different, to just say to you, actually, do you know what? Have you tried doing this, or have you tried doing this? And it can be such a sort of uh, moment where you think to yourself, do you know what? That's such a simple thing, but you know what? Yeah, let me try that. So there's so that was really helpful. And if anyone's got twins or multiples, then I highly recommend Twins Trust. So they're a charity for people who have twins or multiples, and they've got really excellent resources and support on their website. So check them out. They also do courses like breastfeeding courses for twins, or sleep training for twins, or managing challenging behavior for twins. So yeah, so that was really helpful.
Great, mashallah.
Yeah.
And in terms of the parenting coach or the parenting coach that you've had, and that's faith based. If some of our dear listeners here would like to know more about that, is there any kind of did you find them in a website, or where did you find them, so that if anybody would like to reach out to a parenting coach?
Yeah, so I use a lady called at Lawyer Mum. She's on Instagram, and she's amazing. Her sort of speciality is discipline. So she's called Perveen, and she's really good. But there's so many out there, and you have to. It's such a personality thing, working with the right coach. So you really have to find someone that you relate to, and because again, there's so many different parenting models out there. So you really have to find one that works for you and goes with your principles. So yeah, just do a little bit of research. There's so many out there.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's quite important, because sometimes it's difficult to do it on your own. And as you said that, for you, mashallah, you had twins on, with everything else that was happening at the same time. So getting that support again probably was not easy for you, but alhamdulillah, it has made a difference for you, alhamdulillah. And I would like to also add, understanding your children's personality is very important as well.
Yes.
They might be a little bit young, but we usually do the personality work from the age of 6 and above. But
Okay.
that is very important because one of the things that a lot of parents do, and they do it with a good intention, is that if one of their children is good at something, they start comparing. It's like, oh, why are you not like your brother? Or are you not like your
Yeah.
sister? Or why can't you be like so and so? Now, this can be. I know that they doing it from the perspective is that they want to motivate them to be better, but for some personalities that can be hindering, because they might start to think, well, there's something wrong with me, and then they will grow up thinking, having that belief, and that will lower their self-esteem, their confidence, and so on. So it can have negative impacts on them. So that's why it's quite important to understand the personality of each child and treat them accordingly, because what works for somebody might work differently for someone else based on their personalities. So I'd really recommend getting to know more about your children and their personalities and treating them accordingly. Are there any other tips before we go for the break? Actually, you know what? I just realized it is time for a break soon. So we'll continue after the break. But Jazakallah khair for all these amazing tips that you've shared. And just remind the listeners, we have Mahdiyya Dharas with us on the show, who's an audiologist. That I found that word difficult to pronounce. Audiologist, lecturer, and runs her own business. And besides talking about her expertise, she has been sharing with us the difficulties that she experienced, and she shared some tips on how to overcome some of those difficulties. After the break, inshallah, we'll talk more about your expertise and the how you treat patients, for example, who have vertigo or dizziness and so on. So we'll talk a little bit more on that about the break. So, listeners, this is Inspire FM 105.1. Do stay tuned, and we'll see you shortly.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome back to the Arise to Success show. We have Mahdiyya Dharas with us today, who's an audiologist, lecturer, and runs her own business as well. Mahdiyya has shared with us before the break some of the tips that she used in order to manage having to multitask and juggle between different tasks, being a new mom, of twins, having her own career, having her own business, having to care for her mother-in-law. So she provided some great tips on how we can manage situations where we have a lot of pressure, and how we can start delegating tasks to others, as well as getting support from those around us, so that we're not taking all the responsibility ourselves. So that was what we discussed before the break. And after the break now, in fact, actually, before we move into talking about, the certain areas that you cover, Mahdiyya, are there any other tips because I know you touched upon some of the tips before the break, are there any other tips that you wanted to share based on the difficulties that you've experienced in achieving your goals, or are you okay with us to move into the next area? We have plenty of time, so if you have more tips, I'm sure the dear listeners would like to hear it.
Yeah, sure. Since we're on the topic, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
So another thing that really helped me was so one of the weaknesses I found within myself was I find it very difficult. I'm very introverted, very shy. And so even doing things like this, like a radio show, is like a big issue. And Jihad, you'll be probably very annoyed with all my messages that I sent you
Oh,
beforehand.
not at all,
How
not
do
at
I do
all.
it? Because my anxiety just kind of goes up like that.
No,
But
it's absolutely fine.
um, but I had big issues with dealing with my imposter syndrome,
Mm,
and l- one of the big reasons that I decided to become a lecturer and to apply, I don't even know why I applied for that job, because I definitely didn't think that I was capable of it, but I just did
mm,
it,
mm,
was speaking in front of people.
mm,
And that is a big thing for me. And I felt like in order for me to be successful in my business and to be able to give my patients the best treatment and therapy that I can, I need to be able to articulate myself better. That's one of the
mm,
things that I'm really wanting to work on. and be able to speak about my profession and my expertise in a for example, in a networking event, or for example, in conferences, and be able to share scientific information without stammering is a big thing for me. So yeah, imposter syndrome was a big thing. And I so I know that, though I'm sure you've come across the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by
Mm.
Robert Kiyosaki,
Yeah.
and it's been talked about a lot. But for me, that really helped me to understand what I needed to do to move on
Mm.
from my weakness and to be able to be successful in my career. One of the things he said was, you naturally, we're not an expert in everything,
Mm.
but in order for you to run a successful business, and to make a lucrative sort of income from your business, is that you do have to be good at everything. You have to be good at, as we said, running your own business, you have to wear different hats. So in my case, I have to be able to speak publicly. I have to be able to articulate treatment to my patients. I have to be able to undertake CBT and deal with anxiety with my patients. There's all these different things that I need to do. And he says, one of the things that he said was, for example, he wanted to become better at sales.
Mm.
So he decided to get a job in sales, become
Mm.
good at it, and then move on to the next step. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And so I did that. I quit my NHS job. That was a tough decision to make. And I said to myself, what can I do to better myself in terms of public speaking? And this lecturer job just came up. And I thought, okay. So I applied, and alhamdulillah, I got it. And it's great. I absolutely love it. It's not as scary as I thought it would be,
Mm.
teaching.
Mm.
I'm having to teach quite a young cohort. So these are people in their who are teenagers, who are in their early 20s, just
Mm.
starting university. How do you, and I'm so passionate about my field, how do I relate that to
Mm.
a younger audience who are of a different generation, who've grown up in a different culture? How do I do that? And it's all of these skills and tips that I'm starting to learn.
Mm.
And yeah, and it's really helped me in my business and in my personal life with my kids as well.
Mm.
So yeah, so dealing with my imposter syndrome, my one big advice I would give to people is, take don't be scared of going out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Put yourself in situations, because if you are always surrounding yourself with the same people, you're
Mm.
never going to learn new skills. You're just going to be repeating the skills that you know already. And that's good for someone who wants to have high self-esteem and think to yourself, do you know what, I'm good at what I do, because you keep putting yourself in that same situation. And that's good for your self-esteem. But actually, you're not challenging yourself, you're not challenging your weaknesses, you're not strengthening your strengths. So
Mm.
by putting yourself in it, for example, for me, putting myself in a room full of doctors and consultants,
Mm.
it's scary to be in that position,
Mm.
but actually it helps me to enhance my skills, because I'm learning new things constantly from being in a room of people who I think are more sort of intelligent than I am, or more sort of privileged than I am, or earning a lot more money than I am. By putting yourself in that situation, you're actually, yeah, enhancing your skills. So
Mm.
imposter syndrome doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't have to be something you're scared of. Utilize that feeling to your advantage, and push yourself.
Mm. Absolutely.
So yeah, so that's a tip, like that's advice that I try and, so this is why I'm here today doing a radio show,
Mm.
which is really giving me quite high anxiety, but
Mm.
actually this is going to help me in the long term in terms of running my business.
Oh,
uh,
absolutely. Inshallah. Sorry, go ahead.
no so yeah, the next one was
Can I just quickly comment on this before you go to the next one?
yeah, go for it.
So what I love that, and I love that tip that you've shared, because it just indicates that we need to face our fear. Because if we, keep, what's the word that I'm looking for? Avoiding. If we keep avoiding that fear, it's just going to create more and more fear, and that fear is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So the fact that you've actually faced your fear because you knew that you needed that for your business, for example, for your self-development, for instance, you faced it, and once you face it, that fear starts to become smaller and smaller and smaller until you don't end up having that fear at all. So thank you for sharing this. I just wanted to point that out because a lot of us, and that's something I did as well in the past, is that I would just avoid my fear, and then it would
Yeah.
just create more and more fear. But if you
Yeah.
face it, it doesn't become a fear anymore because you're actually facing it, you're dealing with it, and you are developing further, inshallah. So yes, I just wanted to point that out. And yeah, go ahead. Next tip. Mashallah, you're providing amazing tips there.
And it's good to question that fear, because fear is not logical, right?
Yes.
It's an illogical thing. So it's only when you question it that you'll think to yourself, well, actually, why am I afraid of that? What's the worst case scenario? And it's only when you test that fear that you realize that the worst case scenario doesn't actually exist. You're not going to die because you're standing in front of people, although it might feel like you are at the time. It's not going to happen. So it's really good to test that theory sometimes. But I'm not saying go out there and just face your fears just like that. You have to work on yourself before you do that and put yourself in those situations. So getting a business coach or taking a friend with you or asking for support, and strengthening yourself, prepare yourself. Basically, you're not going to run a marathon on the first day. You have to prepare yourself to do that. And it's okay to ask for help and then put yourself out there. So don't just run the
Yes.
marathon, prepare for it. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of remembering when I was at my lowest, people would come, like I found it very, very, it's almost like I feel really bad saying it, but I'm just going to say it. I forgot about God. I forgot about, because I was so busy getting on with life, and a part of me kind of resented Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I thought to myself, why is God doing this to me? Like, I've been such a good person my whole life, and I'm not just getting one challenge, I'm not just getting two challenges. There was all these things coming at me, and people would come up to me and say, have sabr, you're okay. God never puts you in situations that where it's so challenging that it's too challenging for you. Just remember that. And I used to find that quite patronizing, and I'd be like, but it's easy for you to say it, but I'm the one in that situation. And it's almost like I didn't want to think about God, because I was like, he's punishing me for some reason. I haven't done anything to deserve it. So I'm just going to put him to the side and I'm just going to carry on with life and get on with it. And it took a long time for me to kind of sit down and talk to myself and say, actually, do you know what? Now in the long term, that those experiences, as difficult as they were, have actually made me a better person. And I think when you're in that situation, when people are saying that to you, it's very hard to accept that. But actually, when you come out on the other side, it's always good to reflect and look back and think, how has that situation made me, how has it strengthened me, rather than focusing on the weaknesses, like, oh yeah, it really ruined my mental health, and it, now I feel like I've got PTSD and I'm traumatized. Instead of thinking along those lines, think to yourself, how has it strengthened me? Have a little grateful diary and write down things that you are grateful for, because in that moment it's very hard to think to yourself, well, actually I've still got a roof over my head, or actually I've got two beautiful children, as difficult as they may be to parent, or actually I've got an amazing husband who's very supportive. It's very difficult to remember those things. So write it down. At the end of that, really helped me to, and it really helped me to maintain that link and that relationship with God. So that, yeah, it's hard, because when you're in that moment, there's nothing anyone can say to make you feel better. You just kind of have to sometimes get through it. Again, there was a lot of guilt and shame associated with that, because I kept thinking I'm ignoring God, or I'm forgetting God, or I'm not being grateful for the things I should be grateful for. But actually, when I came out of it, like alhamdulillah, like my relationship with God was maintained, and I can look back now and I can say, actually, perhaps I can see why those things were actually good for me in the long term.
Absolutely. That's subhanAllah, a really good point that you made there. And I'm really appreciating the fact that you've shared when it was very difficult, a lot of vulnerabilities, and that's sometimes very difficult for us to share, but mashallah, you've done so to help others benefit as well. So jazakallah khair for that. And I understand how difficult that can be sometimes. So jazakallah khair. And yes, absolutely, like what you mentioned there, and sabr and patience, I feel like sometimes it's used the wrong way.
Yeah.
If you are going through challenges, yes, Allah puts us through challenges for a reason, and that's one of it. In your case, for example, is to make us a better individual. But it doesn't mean that we give up upon what's going on. Sabr is not just accepting and giving up. Yes, accepting, but doing something about it as well. It's like putting your trust in Allah. Tie your camel and put your trust in Allah. So it goes hand in hand, but it doesn't mean that you just wait and just wait for miracles to happen. We've got to take actions, which Allah, you did so by taking the personality test and by making sure that you delegate tasks to others and getting support from those around you and so on to help with your situation. So sabr, I feel like it has been used, or patience, it has been used in a way that can make people feel bad about themselves, or it can make them feel, well, why am I going through that, like what you just experienced or what you just shared with us. So patience is about accepting, but also taking action to help yourself in the situation. So they go hand in hand. So Jazakallah khair for sharing that. And when you reflect, I think that reflection is really important, as you've shared, because that's when you realize what has gone and why it has been beneficial for you as well. Because if we don't reflect at that time, we might be thinking it's a punishment, and then we carry that thought with us. But if we reflect upon it, we realize, actually, you know what? It did feel like that at the time, but subhanAllah, now I can see why I've gone through it. And I'm speaking from experience, subhanAllah, we do go through those difficult experiences and sometimes think, what have I done wrong in my life?
Yes.
I need to experience all of this, but subhanAllah, later on, like, you know what? You thank Allah for things that happen the same way and at that time too, because timing makes a difference. Because it has, subhanAllah, it is for a reason, and we realize later. So that reflection is very important. So Jazakallah khair for sharing all of that. Is there anything else? Because I'm finding
That's it. I'm done.
you know what?
Finally.
It's been really good, mashallah, the things that you've shared, and I'm sure a lot of our dear listeners can relate to that as well. So Jazakallah khair for sharing all of these tips. And that's what this show is all about. It's about, your journey. What is it that made you who you are today? And a lot of it is based on struggles, which the world don't know much about, right? They just see that success. But what about the struggles that made who you are? So that's why I'd like to share these in my shows, so that people don't feel all alone and feel like, you know what? Others are experiencing the same. It's not just me. And if others can manage it, if we can share tips with others that can help them, then inshallah, that's what we'd like to do. And inshallah, for others to get inspired, inshallah, and continue doing their passion. But I just want to remind the listeners that we have Mahdiyya Dharas on the show with us today, who's an audiologist, lecturer, and runs her own business as well, mashallah. Besides talking about her expertise, which we'll get into now, she also shared the difficulties that she has gone through and how she has overcome them as well. She shared amazing tips. So I hope you've all heard those tips. And if you haven't, inshallah, there will be the recording on Facebook and on YouTube as well to catch up with. So moving into your amazing work, mashallah, that you do, Mahdiyya. So if you can tell us more about, for example, symptoms of vertigo, because my sister, for example, she has vertigo, and for a very long time she had no idea what it was, and she thought, I can't even remember, it was some time ago, and you end up treating something else if you don't know what the cause is. So it's very important to know. So perhaps if you could tell us more about what are these symptoms and how do we treat it. If you are treating it, for example, do patients come just for one-off session, or is it something that they continue doing? Are there ways that they can manage it on their own? For example, you mentioned Tai Chi as well, that helps with that.
So vertigo is a feeling of it's what we call an illusion of movement. So where you feel like something, either you are moving or the world is moving when it's not. And it's a perception of dizziness. Now, vertigo, it's quite complicated. And there's so many different underlying issues that can cause dizziness and vertigo. And it differs person to person. Each person will come in, even if two people have the same diagnosis, when you ask them about their symptoms, they'll tell you completely different symptoms to what each other is feeling. So it's very variable. Your balance perception comes from three different systems. So number one is your ears. That's where we perceive balance from the two balance organs in our ears. And these balance organs are called the vestibular system. And then there's what we call the proprioceptive or the somatosensory system. So this is basically your bones and your muscles. So if, for example, you break a leg, that's going to throw you off balance. Yeah. Number three is your visual system. So your eyes, by looking at where we are in the world, that gives us the perception of balance. So if any one of these three systems is not working properly, you're going to feel unbalanced, you're going to feel dizziness, you might feel vertigo. things like that. Now, all of these three systems input that information to your brain. Your brain processes that, and then it puts information back out. So if you, for example, misstep over a pavement, that information goes to your brain. Your brain goes, okay, move the other way, and then you do it. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, so there's lots of different reasons why you might start to feel dizziness. Now, it could be something as simple as your body is trying to give you a message. And this could be, for example, the fact that it's hot, the weather's hot, or it's humid, that can make you feel dizzy. If you're dehydrated, if you've not slept properly in the night, if anxiety is a big one. Like I see that very commonly where anxiety can cause dizziness. And hunger, if you're hungry, if you're not eaten properly, that can cause dizziness. Migraine is another one that can cause dizziness. So it's about listening to your body and just taking a moment to try and understand what that message is that the body is trying to give you. So if, for example, it is something like, oh, I've not drunk all morning, so maybe I should go drink some water, then do all of those things first. If you've not slept properly the night before, then that's probably why you're feeling a bit unbalanced and a bit dizzy the next day. So maybe a good night's sleep will help. So once you've done all of the basic things, what I call the common sense things, which people forget about, because when you've had a really busy day, you might forget to drink enough water and things like that. So just listen to your body, try and understand what it's trying to tell you. It's trying to give you a message. It doesn't have to be something that you have to be afraid of, dizziness. Just listen to your body and try and fix that problem if you can. Now, if the dizziness persists and it goes on and it starts to affect your quality of life, that's the time when you might want to seek medical help. So the first person you might want to visit is your GP. And what you're trying to do is figure out what the underlying cause is. Now, the symptom of dizziness that you have, there's different perceptions of it. So some people might feel lightheadedness, some people might feel vertigo, where they feel like the room is spinning. And by telling us your symptom, we can try and find out what the underlying cause is. So if it's lightheadedness, it might be blood pressure. If it's vertigo, spinning sensations, it might be the ears. If, for example, you feel like you're fainting or you're blacking out, that might be due to your heart. So by talking to a healthcare professional, we can give you advice about where to go next and what you could do about it. So if it is to do with the ears, then there's two reasons why it might be happening. The first reason is something called PPPV, which is crystals in your ears. So in our ears, we have these little crystals that roll around. And sometimes what can happen is these crystals go off into the wrong place and then they're rolling around in the wrong place. And then when you move your head up or down, that can give you that dizzy sensation. And that's quite what we call an easy fix. So there's maneuvers you can do where we move your head in certain positions and we can put these crystals back to where they should be, and that will resolve the spinning sensations that you're getting. Another reason could be long-term anxiety. It could be things like you might have heard of Meniere's disease, or it could be migraine, which can cause dizziness chronically. So people feel dizziness, including spinning sensations, for long periods of time, which can last days and it can go on for months or years. And for that, I offer physical therapy exercises where you can move your head and eyes in a particular way, and that resolves the dizziness. The Tai Chi aspect of it is the great thing about Tai Chi is you're moving your head and eyes in a particular way. So if you check out my YouTube channel, I've put some Tai Chi exercises on there where I get you to do some vestibular rehab. So I'm getting you to move your eyes and ears in a particular way to tackle the dizziness, but at the same time, I've incorporated some mindfulness into it as well to help with the anxiety that comes with dizziness. So you're doing both things at the same time. You're tackling the anxiety and you're tackling the underlying cause in your balance organs to help you with your dizziness as well.
Well, that's quite interesting. And we mentioned anxiety. I was like, wow, subhanAllah, it's very important to look at the root as well. So not just treating the symptom. And I love what you say about the touch because it kind of helps both as well. So just to let our dear listeners as well, if you are suffering from anxiety, make sure you do look into that as well and treat that besides, of course, the symptoms that it has caused. And you mentioned that the crystals in the ear can be moving in the wrong place. What would cause them to move in the wrong place?
So it can be, usually is something quite, for example, a bang to the head, something quite traumatic, or it could be like a virus. So virus can come in, and just like you get viruses in the ear that can cause ear infections and you get discharge, you can also get viruses that go straight to the inner ear, and it can mess around with the crystals in there, or it can inflammate the nerves, the nerve that goes from your vestibular system to your brain. And that can cause dizziness and vertigo as well. So it could be that.
Interesting. And you mentioned vertigo and dizziness. They seem to be quite similar, right? The symptoms of them.
So vertigo specifically is we categorize that as an illusion of movement. So that could be you sitting still, but you feel like things are moving when they're not. So it could be things feeling like they're swaying, like you're on a boat, or it could be something quite dramatic where you literally feel like the world is going around, like you're on a roller coaster. Whereas dizziness is all of the other stuff that people might perceive. So it could be like lightheadedness. It could be like feeling like you're fainting. It could be nausea feelings that you get. All of that stuff categorizes under dizziness.
Interesting. Jazakallah khair for that. And you mentioned that you've got some YouTube videos. So if you can perhaps share with us as well, so the dear listeners can go and watch some of the things that you have that can help them, and also other ways that the listeners can find you as well. I think you're based in Bedford, right?
Yeah, so I've got actually quite a few clinics. I've got one in Bedford, Leicester, and Peterborough. So yeah, best place to see information is my website, which is www.dizzyears.co.uk. But yeah, my YouTube channel, and I've got an Instagram as well. So if you type in Dizzy Ears, that will come up as well. So yeah, I've got a couple of YouTube videos that you can check out, which shows you some of the balance exercises I get my patients to do. But in particular, yeah, the Tai Chi ones are really good as well.
Oh, brilliant. So our dear listeners, make sure you start to Tai Chi if you don't do them already. And perhaps just, watching YouTube videos, inshallah, that can help as well. Before we end, sorry, I'm mixing both your first name and
Great last name.
So I do apologize. Mahdiyya. What would you advise our dear listeners? And I know you've shared a lot of great tips there. What would you advise them in general to do today to achieve their goals and not give up upon them, regardless of the struggles? Because we will face struggles, we will face challenges. And I think to have that expectation is quite important as well, because if we think that it's going to go all well, it's not. And that can demotivate us. So quick, things that you would recommend to the listeners to continue their passion.
Yeah, to achieve your goals. So the first one would be to challenge yourself. So that's the alarm going off. So the first one would be to challenge to challenge yourself and to take yourself out of your comfort zone so that you can strengthen your strengths and reduce your weaknesses. And the second one would be to prioritize. So take that pressure off yourself. And as women, we can do a lot, but we can't do everything. So accept that and prioritize what's more important and just accept it. It's okay that you can't do everything all at once.
Yes, absolutely. So accepting and then also taking action. So Jazakallah khair for that. And I'm sorry I had to just get you to summarize this very quickly. But Jazakallah khair for being with us and for sharing all these things that I found beneficial. And inshallah, I'm hoping that our dear listeners will find beneficial as well, inshallah. I'm just going to quickly just let the listeners know that next week's show is going to be a great one as well. So please do stay tuned. I do have a guest who's an owner for tourism business in Turkey who specializes in tours for the Sahabas as well as Ertugrul tours. So if you're an Ertugrul if you're an Ertugrul fan like myself, make sure you tune in. And if you do know somebody who's an Ertugrul fan, please get them to tune in. So that will be next week, Monday, the 18th of September at 6 p.m. Jazakallah khair, Daria, again. Mahdiyya, I do apologize. Jazakallah khair, Mahdiyya, again. It has been really amazing having you today. Jazakallah khair, dear listeners. And until next time, inshallah, assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at Inspire FM Luton.